All right, welcome back to Firewall. I'm your host, Bradley Tusk. It's a Tuesday episode. With us is both our friend and producer, Hugo Lindgren. Hugo, how you doing?
Great day to be alive, I think.
And our friend and colleague and CEO of Tusk Strategies, Chris Coffey. Chris, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Good.
So we've got a pretty packed agenda today.
Yeah.
So a couple things up top. So one
We have hot breaking news.
We do?
Yeah.
P. Lonzo?
The Gotham Book Prize nominees.
But I'm not breaking it. It was the AP had the story on
Well,
Friday.
you're breaking it for Firewall.
I am sure every Firewall listener has an alert on their phone for the Gotham
Really?
Book
But
Prize
you're going to read it
nominations.
anyway, so I think people are going to be hearing it for the
All
first
right.
time.
Most of you will be hearing this for the first time, 99% of you. A little bit on DeepSeek, just because I think it's worth addressing given the content of our podcast. And then Chris and I are going to talk about, they'll jump into wherever you want, Chris, before that also. New York politics, a lot happening, national politics, and then recommendations. And especially on books, Chris and I trade book recommendations nonstop anyway. So I'm curious what he's reading because we actually haven't traded any in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So, all right. So
You
let's
don't
start
care
with
about mine?
Well, they're always about like some 1970s punk rock, like memoir. You know, it's always the same thing.
So unfair. I do have one. I'm going to save it for that
we
section.
will let you do it. All right, so the 2025 Gotham Book Prize finalists. I'm going to read them off.
Go slow
okay.
so people can hear them.
Feel free to come to P&T Knitwear or anywhere else to get your books and check these out, and we will announce it in May. Anita Diamante Last by Xochitl Gonzalez. Brooklynites by Parithi Kanka Mandala. Do Something by Guy Trebay. Entitlement by Ruman Alam. Everything and Nothing at Once by Joel Leon. How to Fall in Love in a Time of Unnamable Disaster by Muriel Lung. Memory Piece by Lisa Coe. Movement by Nicole Gelinas. Paradise Bronx by Eden Fraser. Swans of Harlem by Karen Valby. The Freaks Come Out to Write by Trisha Romano. The Coin by Yasmin Zaher. There Is No Ethan by Anna Akbari. And Victim by Andrew Borga. Have you guys read any of these?
No. That's terrible.
I read The Freaks.
Yep, right. We had Trish on the podcast.
Yeah, we did. And I've read about half of Nicole's book, Movement,
Okay.
which I think is fantastic.
You didn't read the Guy Trebay book? That's like literally what I was just making fun of you for 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
80s New York memoir type
Yeah,
thing.
I know Guy a little bit, so I'm not reading it.
No, you're not. You're really on a stretch of knowing authors and not reading stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I've read some of these so far. I read Guy's book, which I liked. I read Xochitl Gonzalez. I like her work in general. I didn't like this one as much as her last book. I read There Is No Ethan by Anna Akbari, who is a Gotham Book Prize juror, but had to recuse herself this year because she has a book that's partly in New York. Love Victim by Andrew Borga. That was one of my nominees. The Freaks Come Out to Write. I have started Nicole's book, Movement. She's been on this podcast before.
She's great. Yeah.
I have that book. I just haven't read it. It's in my queue. It's in
what
my
an
queue.
incredible amount of work. I mean, she really,
Yeah.
it's years and years in the making.
Yeah, and then I started Entitlement and just wasn't into it at all. So I'm not going to keep going because I know I'm not going to
When do you decide to stop reading a book?
Typically about 40 to 50 pages in.
40, 50 pages.
What about you?
I'm like 100, but I think that's too long. I think it's too long.
Yeah, I think it's too
sometimes
long.
sometimes you just know and you
100 is
force
too long.
yourself to
And what
stay.
about, so this came up last night. So Laurel and I tried watching Den of Thieves 2.
Yeah, I heard it was bad.
Did you guys see the first one? First one was good.
Oh, yeah?
And at one point she's like, well, how much longer? I was like, let's give it 15. And after like 4 more, she's like, it's not getting better. And I was like, you're right. Why would we keep wasting time on this? So I realized last night I don't have a clear standard for movies in the way that I do books. Books 40 to 50, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the problem, so especially TV shows, if you watch the first episode of The Wire, like it's slow, you know? And actually, so is Breaking Bad. Was
However, there is a
slow.
murder in the first episode of The Wire.
There is, but it's
And
slow.
that great line where they're talking about the kid that every time tries to rob the craps game and they let him play again. And they say, well, why do you keep letting, and then they beat the shit out of him. They're like, well, why do you keep letting him play? He goes, you got to. This is America.
Yeah, that's true.
So
But you guys, I
McNulty
think there's
tells
a difference
that
between
story.
sticking with a series and sticking with a movie.
Yeah, and I will say, so Severance, which I just couldn't get into at all.
2 or 1?
Well, so season 1, I tried a couple times,
Oh, I
couldn't
love
get into
I
it.
love
Everyone
it.
else did but
I
me.
loved it.
So Laurel yesterday made me watch like a 15-minute recap of season 1 on YouTube, which is actually very well done.
Yeah, I saw it.
And then we jumped into season 2 and we watched the first 2 episodes. And I'm confused. I won't say I'm not, but she's trying to answer my questions as we go along. But it's certainly, I like it more than the first season, which I just couldn't do.
So I'm having trouble with season 2, but I've got to plow through it because I love season 1.
I have no expectations. Maybe that's better.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
Are we going to talk about DeepSeek?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, have you downloaded the app? Have you used it?
No, because I'm a little afraid that like I'm going to give the Chinese all my stuff.
I know, that's what I feel too.
Yeah.
So why are people downloading it? It's the number one downloaded app.
I will say I have seen this in polling anecdotally, and I think Chris will say the same thing. I just don't think Americans care about privacy. I think there are groups that do on the left and the right, but I think overall they don't. And I think younger people especially just have zero expectation of it whatsoever. And so
are they okay with like Elon Musk taking over like the Treasury Department's payment systems and just knowing their social security numbers and stuff? You think they don't care about that?
That might be another level of this kind of thing. But I think overall, like, I'm not on TikTok. Now it's because I use social media, but I also would, even if I did, be reluctant to use it because why would I want to give the Chinese government all my info? But obviously 180 million Americans feel differently. So,
Have you ever put a piece of tape over the camera on your laptop?
No.
Have you seen people that do that?
I have, but we use it constantly for Zoom.
Right. But so I was like, I've never done that. Seems whatever, a little crazy to me. And then someone said, yeah, well, they were watching like some kind of television interview with Mark Zuckerberg, and he had a piece of tape over his camera.
Yeah, sure.
And they're like, I saw that, and I'm like, I'm putting one on.
People are trying to hack into him. I don't think people are trying to hack into me.
Yeah, but they might. I mean, you work for political candidates.
That's true. My husband does not give up any information ever about. He's like, do you accept this thing? And he declines it.
No cookies.
And
nothing.
I just click everything. I just click yes to everything before
just
me.
faster.
He actually, if he has to sign it, he'll just click it to me because he knows I don't care.
Right.
It's very interesting. People are different.
And when you're in Europe, I have to say, I know GDPR is this whole structure to protect privacy, and I do think we should have some sort of data privacy framework in this country. But the only thing I can notice is you get 10 times more of those.
Yes,
accepts.
right, yeah. So on the subject of DeepSeek, so you haven't tried it, but what's your? I mean, like it's obviously roiled the markets. Everybody's like this cheaper form of these cheaper chips supposedly have created this thing that's just as good.
There's one of two ways to look at this, depending on what the true facts are.
Okay,
Way one would be you
We'll
accept DeepSeek that what they said is honest and true, which means ironically, because of the security restrictions we put on acquiring chips, a Chinese company that couldn't acquire the number of chips they needed had to come up with a different strategy to be able to build the tech they needed without it. And they came up with this inference model instead, which, so as I understand it, let's say that you would ask ChatGPT a question and it would consult 20 different sources, databases, everything else, and then run through all of them and then give you an answer. What DeepSeek does is say, you know what, 1 through 19, we're assuming that number 19 that we would get to is valid, accurate information. So rather than 20, we're just going to do number 19. And by not doing those first 18, you are saving incredible amounts of energy and compute power. And so the inference model is just exponentially cheaper to run. So if that's true, then that changes a lot, right? It's good and bad. It's good in the sense that it will make AI a cheaper tool for people to use. It will not require as much energy. It will not require, trillions of dollars in new chips to be able to perform it. It's bad because it seems like all of the U.S. companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and Perplexity and everyone else all went all in on the other side, on the other model. And so they don't have a system, an inference-based system that can use a lot less compute power. And ultimately, I was thinking like my own portfolio companies, putting aside whatever Chinese hacking privacy risk you want to think about. If I had a portfolio company that, was running an app on top of an AI LLM, and they said to me, well, we're doing ChatGPT or whatever it is at this price, or we're doing DeepSeek at, a fraction of it, I would have a hard time seeing why they would need ChatGPT. Now, it may be something that is so specific and precise and whatever, okay. But generally speaking, people go for the cheaper versions of products, especially if they're covering 90% of the efficacy that the other models are doing. And so, I think that, now look, there's another possibility here, which is what OpenAI is claiming, which I don't know if it's true or they just claim it because, which is, they stole all of our tech and they built it on our tech, meaning ultimately they did use all the compute power. They just did it illegally.
Right. The thing that seems to me is that, like, here we are kind of early days of consumer use of AI, and already there's like all these competing models. And what I wonder is like is it just going to be this arms race for like where there'll be some new breakthrough and suddenly like all the things we thought like 3 months ago are like totally out the window. And if that is the case, then like I mean, it does make you realize that like the chip builders are where it's at. Any of these particular brands or big things are just going to be roadkill, right? I mean, like, it's going to be Yahoo or like
there's a human instinct to assume that whatever is now is what will always be, right? And I remember multiple times in the last year going on CNBC and talking about NVIDIA, and they always wanted me to say either this will go on forever, or it's a bubble that's about to burst.
Right.
And I kept which kept annoying them because I kept refusing to either, saying, look, this thing is evolving so quickly, we don't know. I said, NVIDIA might come up with something in the next month or two that extends their lead by 10x, or someone else, I had no idea DeepSeek existed, but whatever, might come along in the other direction. And so like this thing is going to evolve and move so fast that to pay widely inflated prices for either public stocks of AI-related companies, or, by the way, to invest in an OpenAI at a valuation of $100 billion, when what if DeepSeek is right and OpenAI is basically roadkill, like you said, then that's all money burned and down the trash or toilet, or whatever you want to call it. So I think you just got to be cautious on either side here.
Chris, are you using do you have ChatGPT on your phone?
No.
You don't. And do you have it on your phone, the app?
I use Perplexity.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I have the app. I just love it. I use the little audio feature just to ask questions, and it's just like having like a super fast Google, like just direct
Most
to
of
what
the
you
time,
want.
yeah. And then occasionally what happens is you ask it a question that you know the answer to, and it gets it wrong.
It's like reading the New York Times where you're like, wait, they don't quite have this right.
Right. So whereas with Google, I think our expectations are regular Google, a little lower, because okay, we're going to get a bunch of sort of relevant and quasi-relevant search results, and then we have to sort of draw the inferences.
So why is Perplexity better than ChatGPT for you?
I don't know that it is.
You like the name better?
I just the user interface.
You're like the guy who used AIM toothpaste when we were growing up, not Crest, kind of like that?
We didn't use either of those.
Really?
Well, I do use Arm & Hammer.
Aquafresh? You use Colgate.
I use Arm & Hammer. Maybe we used
back
Colgate
then.
as a kid.
You used Arm & Hammer growing up?
No, now we do.
Oh, okay.
It's quite good. It's my recommendation of the week. No, I have no good reason for Perplexity over ChatGPT, other than I tend to never like the favorite, the incumbent, the institutional player in any situation.
Right.
And so ChatGPT and OpenAI to me is sort of like the Yankees.
Well, that's what they'll do. They'll just have a little skin on everything, so people can get their punk rock AI. They can have their sort of Cadillac AI. They can,
They will have that.
They will, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so you guys are going to talk New York City politics.
Yeah. So
I like to just sit here and watch that because
Sure.
I will say this just as this is my favorite part of Firewall when you guys talk New York City politics. I'm not just saying that to make you guys feel good, because I don't care if you feel good,
to reinforce
but I enjoy it.
I appreciate that. And to reinforce it, and Chris knows this, when I went on book tour, I would get people coming up to me during the signings and say like, oh, I love it when you have Chris on. And
Wow, that's sweet.
So,
I didn't pay any of those people.
yeah, maybe one or two.
Hugo, we'll talk later.
All right. So, Chris, let's start with New York, and there's a lot happening in New York politics now. A lot on the mayor's race alone. Yep. So, why don't you, if you don't mind, just kind of catch listeners up to where you think the baseline is
for the mayor's race?
Yes, mayor's race and mayor, because there's so many overlapping pieces.
We are. It's really interesting. We're now 4.5 months out from a primary. Like people, five. We are 5 months exactly. It's about 5 months from now. And so we're in the middle of what should be a campaign, and yet the campaign in many ways feels like it's on hold because we don't really know who the candidates are. So you have a few candidates, and I don't want to describe them as second tier. So they're by the way, they're absolutely not second tier, but they're not the front runners. And so that would be State Senator Zellner Myrie, who's a state senator, from
really nice guy,
really great guy, Central Brooklyn, really, really smart as well. State Senator Jessica Ramos from Queens, who is running as a progressive. Brad Lander is the city controller. People thought he would be, now maybe he should be a slightly upper tier, but his polling and his campaign and his fundraising has not shown that. And then, who am I forgetting? Zoran. Zoran is running as an assemblyman. He is a socialist. He is probably running the best campaign of the declared candidates. He has something like 7 times more donations than anybody else. His social media is all over the place, gets a ton of views. I think younger folks tend to like him. Very, very anti-Israel. He wouldn't say that. I would say that. and sort of like, probably a little bit scary to sort of establishment, business, crime.
He's
folks.
the demagogue in the race.
Yes, I think he's going to come in the top 3. That's my prediction.
Yep.
And then you have Scott Stringer, who I think was supposed to be, or many people thought would be second tier, who tends to be polling basically in second right now. And obviously, also Eric Adams, who is in the race. He's polling right now at between 7 and 11%. Nobody really knows if he's running or not. He says he's running. I think reporters and most insiders believe that he's running. Of course, he has to say that he's running because at the same time, he's trying to get a pardon from Donald Trump. And I think conventional wisdom is Donald Trump's not going to pardon him if he's not useful to him. And he's much more useful if he's the mayor who's running for reelection. But he also is probably running. I think that is at the same time, if he gets the pardon, then or the case is dropped, then all the more reason for him to run because he doesn't have this huge legal issue hanging over
You saw
him.
in the Post today there was some new polling that was released. Now I only saw the article. I was trying to find the actual poll across tabs and I couldn't. But Adams sort of combined doing a fair or poor job was like in the 80s, and in the race itself, Cuomo was at 35. And everyone else, Adams, Lander, Stringer, Zoran, were all 10 or less.
Yep. So, and by the way, I saw a poll last week that I don't think was released. It said 79% of people say they will not rank Eric Adams. They just won't. So if you, and the whole point of the election, it's a ranked choice election. You basically need 51% of people to put you on their ballot somewhere, right? And it's very, very hard if you don't get a lot of first place votes. I mean, you can't come in with 3% of first place votes.
Do you remember when Sean Donovan ran in 2021? And Sean's a nice man, and I guess a former colleague from the Bloomberg world. But you were the one that they kept telling you or people around him, like, he's going to get all these second place votes. And you're like, but you have to get first place votes to win.
It's not ranked choice. Isn't magic, man. It's not magic. People need to vote. You had all these Sean Donovan and Ray McGuire, and you had all these people who would not make deals at the end. They just were gonna be in it till the end because they were like, well, you never know about ranked choice. And it's like,
yes, you
do. Know that if you don't get votes, you're not gonna win, man. So I don't understand those. But by the way, if you think about that field, that was a pretty accomplished field, right? Like
compared to this
you
one.
had a housing secretary, you had Ray McGuire, Catherine Garcia, who had run city
Yang was a presidential
Yang was a
campaign.
presidential,
Adams
and Eric
was a
Adams,
president.
Scott Stringer.
Maya Wiley had been general counsel, the mayor. Yeah.
And we'll see. This field.
So why aren't there better candidates?
Well, I think people thought it's harder to run against an incumbent mayor, so I think fewer people run, and I think people don't want to get into like it's just a muck, right? By the way, the person we haven't talked about is the person who's probably the front runner. He is the front runner if he gets in, which is Andrew Cuomo. People think he's running. I think he's probably running. He's going to wait as long as he can, I'm sure, before he gets in because he watched. There's really not a lot of benefit to getting in the race early.
Let me ask you a question about that because yes, but I read this morning that he can only transfer $1 million of the money in his statewide PAC or his statewide account into his city race. Now I understand there'll be independent expenditures. Times had a big story about that this morning. But in order to get matching funds, doesn't he need to start raising money?
I think there's some dispute about that. I saw that number too, and I'm not sure that that's
What do you
true.
think the number could be?
Closer to 5.
Okay,
I think so. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I am an expert. I am an expert. I think he can
Nobody
loan.
would listen. Everyone just turned off this podcast. They're like, he's not an expert.
Yeah,
Forget
expert.
it. Fuck am I listening to this?
My reading of it, again, I could be wrong. I think he can loan himself money as long as he pays himself back by election day. And so if he loans him, he has something like $7 or $8 million. He can't loan it all. I think he can loan $3, $4, $5 million to himself. Again, there's some discrepancy between which one, and he has to pay it back. And if he does that, he. By the way, Andrew Yang. The reason Andrew Yang got in he got in late, and we were finished fundraising in about 7 weeks. And that was someone, people will want to. He had a network, but Cuomo has a network also, and people want to raise for the front runner. And
did you see the petitions April 3rd?
So that's the
late.
last day. They start the last week of February.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so it's something like the last week of February to the first week of April.
It's for mayor. It's a very easy low bar.
It is. Yeah, I think Elliot Spitzer got in with something like a week left.
It was a week.
Petitions.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Wait, Elliot Spitzer got in
to the controller's race in 2013.
Okay.
And basically all you have to do is just a money thing and a little bit of name ID, which is you just put a ton of people in parks like Union Square Park.
Right, and get the signatures.
And you know that some percentage of signatures you're going to get, 25, 30, are going to be people sign Mickey Mouse or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you get enough. And the truth is in New York City, Stone Hill registered Democrats that, you can basically just, anyone that wants to sign, just take their signature and take the chance.
There is one other reason for Cuomo to think about getting in a little bit earlier, which is there's a dark money group that is spending money against him. And my understanding...
Who is that group?
I don't know. I know that someone who used to work for him is running it. Peter Kaufman is running it. I don't know that the folks are disclosed. I think there's some...
Peter, more importantly, is the host of Mets Fix, which is our favorite
This
Mets
is a huge podcast.
Yeah.
My understanding is they can take money and not disclose as long as Cuomo's not a candidate. So as soon as Cuomo's a candidate...
Right, because then people will be afraid.
You have to... Well, also you have to disclose the donors.
Right, but I think the donors will feel very differently if they have to be disclosed. So two questions about Eric Adams.
Yep.
One would be, you said he'll probably run, but his numbers are historically bad, and I think as Harry Siegel pointed out in his column yesterday, they were historically bad long before he got indicted or anything like that. So if Adams called you today and said, Chris, what do you recommend?
Woof.
What's the point of running and being embarrassed? Why is that better than not running?
Well, so you have to enter Eric Adams' mind, I think, which is that the establishment has always been against me. The report, I mean, to me, this part's super delusional, having run an actual campaign in 21 where everybody was against them. But like, he thinks the reporters are all against him. And so now,
I've had this conversation with him about
but
that.
It's delusional.
Or let me tell you what I said to him. I don't think, which is every mayor thinks that. Mike felt that way. De Blasio felt that way. Rudy felt that way. When you have a daily briefing, as the mayor, and you have these people whose whole job it is to try to trip you up and make you look bad, every mayor is invariably going to feel like they're against him.
But he literally has, and he still somehow has the New York Post. And the Post, I mean, he does not remember that in 2021, the Post spent 7 weeks attacking every other candidate and lauding him every day, which dictates the television coverage. It dictates all sorts of feeling. I mean, there's nothing more important right now in New York City politics, in the media, than the New York Post. The Times used to rival it. They stopped endorsing. They no longer rival it. They're not doing daily coverage to the same extent. And so the Post is far and away. And they've got guys from his administration that are calling them scumbags and all sorts, like, mind-boggling to me the way they've treated
the Post, if Adams runs, does the Post stick with him?
I don't know. The Post has had all sorts of problems with Cuomo historically. They liked him, and then the nursing homes and COVID, and they really, really had problems with him. I think they're becoming, quote, curious. Which is there's not a lot there's not a lot of places for them to go, right?
There's nowhere else.
But also just as a pure, like if it's sort of like Trump, right? If you're in the media, you want a big assertive mayor who's doing crazy shit all the time, kicking up fights and everything. I mean, Cuomo's great for selling newspapers, right? I mean, not just as a candidate, but
he'll
as
be good. Although
they have an agenda.
What if Donald Trump, they drop the charges and Trump says, I endorse Eric Adams for mayor?
Yeah.
Then does the Post just have to go along with it because Trump wants it?
And by the way, the Post is still being fined to Eric Adams. Like, the Post is not left. There's still, I mean, there was an editorial not long ago that was like slogging through. I don't know what the Post would do in a scenario where Eric and Andrew were both in the race.
But that's the likely scenario, right?
I think at the end of the day, yes, that is right now the likely scenario.
For whatever reason, I will predict that they won't both be on the ballot in June. And I will say, I did predict that you wouldn't have both Trump and Biden on the ballot in November. That turned out to be right.
I thought you said that you wouldn't have either of them.
I think I might have said that.
Yeah.
I got 50%.
But you got one, yeah. Here's a question for you. If Adams does step down because he gets a job and some Trump-related job, or at least not run, I mean, does Jessica Tisch have a chance of getting in the race? Would she run against Cuomo?
I think by the way, I like Jessica Tisch. I think she would be a fantastic mayor. I think there's a lane for a qualified technocrat, even better if you're a woman. I think the window is fast closing.
Even though she wouldn't have to raise money.
She would. I think she would not. I don't think she would be a self-funder.
Let's just say she were for purpose of this argument, because the Tisch family could put $100 million into her raise if they wanted to. They have that kind of money.
I just don't think they would do that.
Okay,
but sure, put that aside. Then I guess technically she has until April 3rd.
Is that what she need? 100?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be a lot of millions. 20
keep in mind,
million,
she's gotten some good press as police commissioner, But still, I would guess the vast majority of the city has no clue who she is.
Agreed. Yeah.
She'd get a lot of press attention, but it's going to be some huge amount of money. I don't even think it's the money. I think it's like the idea of self-funding, and I just don't think they would do it. I think they'd be risk of. I don't think they would do it. But if they did, I suppose, and the mayor dropped out, I guess she could get in as late as April 3rd or March 25th or whatever it was to do the petitions. I think that's not going to happen.
I also think running against Cuomo is tough.
Yep.
Right, because they'd be competing for the same voters, the same donors, the same policies, the same everything.
And it's hard to see black voters. I mean, Cuomo does. So Cuomo polls through the roof with black voters. Now, Eric Adams is going to, like, whatever happened. I saw a poll where Cuomo is beating Adams among Adams' 21 voters by 2-1. So, like, those are tough numbers for the mayor. And I'm sure he is seeing some of those polls. He may stay in and believe he can turn it around. And once he gets his accomplishment, once the case is passed, like, who knows what he thinks? But I think it's a tough road. At the same time, if Andrew and Eric are going at it every day, it's going to be a slog, right? Like, if that's a slog.
See, that's a scenario where, I mean, I know this is so unlikely it's not even worth talking about, but that's where you'd see a third candidate having a chance if Adams and
but
Cuomo
it's
were
really
killing each
hard
other.
to get how they get attention.
By the way,
unless you spend $100 million.
Right.
I think Cuomo's the front runner, but I can make a case where in that scenario, someone like Scott Stringer, who is appealing to folks on both sides, he'll be on. If you're progressive, you're only Democrats.
He came in sixth last time. How appealing can he be?
So right now he's polling in second behind Cuomo. Progressives, I think if you're progressive, you're going to put Scott fourth or fifth on your ballot. I think if you're a moderate, you're going to put him second or third. And then there's a bunch of sort of white normie voters.
Let's go through. And actually, I was going to want to tell you anyway. I'm going to give you the voting block. I'm going to vote block, and you tell me who's their first, second, and third choice.
It's very presumptuous of us, but let's do it.
We're
experts. This is the whole point of this.
This is the entire notion of podcasting.
I'm just taking a big
exactly
caveat here. What do I know
this
about?
This is no
I'll do the gays.
More speculative than why
I'll do the
Dallas
gays
made
and
that
the
crazy
Jews.
trade this weekend.
Are we going to talk about that?
We can.
Okay.
All right. So let's start with progressives. Their first choice is...
Well, I think... So this is where I think Brad Lander had a terrible year. Brad Lander should have consolidated the left in 2024, raised a bunch of money, risen in the issues, and been the standard bearer. And he did not. He didn't raise a lot of money. He didn't consolidate the left.
Is it because he was trying to move to the middle, or he just
I have no
was
idea.
too passive?
I don't know the answer to that. But he didn't do it. He didn't sort of become the anti-Eric in the way that the controller, the sitting controller of the city of New York, should have. And so now he's sort of running to the middle, but he's got problems. So I think Zohran, if you're a real true progressive, it seems like Zohran might be your person. And my guess would be Zohran first, Brad, Jessica, Zellner. I mean, Brad is more high profile, but I think Brad is running to the center, and progressives don't progressives want someone that's going to speak their language. So I don't know the answer to that, but it's some that mix.
All right. So now let's say African American. There's some percentage of African Americans to progressives, but not actually that many. So African American voters, of which we should also say it's much 2-1 female. So it's African American voters, African American women are not exactly synonymous, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, Cuomo by far, Eric second, and maybe Zellner third. I don't know.
Okay, Latinos.
I think that's a big question mark. I suspect Andrew and Eric. I suspect Cuomo and Eric will split a lot of those. And sorry, Jessica Ramos is Jessica Ramos, at least in these early polls at 9, 10, 11, and you suspect a lot of that is Latino support.
And also and this is true by the way within every demographic, but with Latinos especially, I've found it's really not one group, right? So Puerto Rican and Dominican voters have a very different approach usually than Central and South American voters. So if you split it up that way, how would you do it?
I don't know. I mean, I think the Dominicans that tend to be a little bit more moderate here. I assume Cuomo and Eric will do well, and there'll be some folks that vote for Jessica because she is Latino, and they like her, and there's some progressives too.
Right, Asian voters.
Yeah, I think Eric is going to do well with Asian voters if he's in the race, but I think Asian voters tend to be more. Again, by the way, the macro on this election is that this is an election that favors folks that are in favor of more public safety provisions. This is a time where people do not feel safe in New York. Polling consistently shows that. They feel that the city isn't being run well, quality of life isn't where it should be. And so in those elections, the moderate tends to do well. You can go back to 1977. You can look at 2001, sort of 1993, where Rudy ran against David Dinkins, and certainly 2021, where Eric Adams became the favorite because of public safety. And so if you look at that and you look at the macro, if you're a progressive, the stuff isn't lining up well for you.
So if you're an
Which,
Asian,
by the way, I suspect that's why Brad is running to the center right now, and why Scott Stringer wants 3,000 more cops when he was a defunder 4 years ago, because you have to be sort of pro-public safety to win an election right now.
Right. So though, if you're an Asian voter, it's true across the board, but and the city feels worse than ever to you, why would you vote for list Eric Adams at all?
Eric has done a lot in the Asian community. He's the most moderate of the bunch. You don't want to. I mean, by the way, I think Cuomo and Eric will split those votes.
Okay. Orthodox
And
Jews.
remember, it's ranked choice, so it's like 1, 2, like who knows, right? So Orthodox Jews, Cuomo will vote for Adams, I think, and Cuomo will be second. There's some patching up that Cuomo has to do from the red zones and from COVID. I think he'll do it. And I think if Orthodox Jews think that Cuomo is going to be first, they'll either rank him first or second, and he'll have, it'll be some work, but he'll get there.
White ethnic, so this would be like outer borough, older Italian Irish Jews.
Cuomo.
White.
They won't fill in anyone else in
kind
the
of
rank
brown,
choice, just Cuomo.
non super progressive, brownstone, Brooklyn, Upper West Side.
So to me,
liberals.
this is the biggest, right? This is a big voting block that doesn't have a clear candidate, right? Garcia was the candidate in 2021. She came 7,000 votes off the lead. If you look at where she did really well, it was brownstone, Brooklyn. It was the Upper West Side. It was the Upper East Side. It was sort of white normie voters in the city, not super moderate, not super progressive. I would even say like Chris Coffey voters, right? Maybe I would say Bradley, but you're not.
I'm not a primary
You're not,
voter. Yeah.
you're not you voters, me voters. And I don't know the answer to that. Scott Stringer's going to fight really hard for them. Andrew Cuomo's going to fight really hard for them. I don't think Eric has a path to winning these voters. I think they're the most frustrated with him of the lot.
Yep.
I think Scott's whole candidacy, and to a lesser extent Brad's, relies on winning a block of these voters. I think a lot of them are going to go to Cuomo. I think some of them will go to Scott. They don't have anywhere to go.
This seems to me the group that would be most likely to be like never Cuomo. Just like that.
But again, this gets back to the my mom, who
Right.
very much fits into that bucket, who I think for a lot of reasons doesn't like Andrew Cuomo personally, but had said to me, I don't feel safe on the bus. And that's it. That's it.
Right.
And we're not, I think there's a distinction. We're not talking about Park Slope, right? We're not talking about Maya Wiley voters who tend to be much more progressive. You're talking about like Brooklyn Heights, the Upper East Side. Where are they going to go?
See, I'm thinking of my in-laws, my wife's parents, and they just think Cuomo is.
But where are they going to
So
go?
who will they vote for?
It's a good question. I think
They got to vote for someone.
Yeah, they're not going to vote for Adams either.
Or they don't vote?
Do they want a progressive?
Definitely not.
So where are they going?
I mean, they want Jessica Tisch. They may not even really know who she is, but that's who they want.
Yeah.
They want Catherine Garcia.
But
look,
on election day, there's going to
by
be
the way,
6 people on the ballot.
Maybe
whatever it
that's
is.
Stringer, but the problem is, knowing Stringer's strategy in the past, it was very heavily reliant on the New York Times, which is now not endorsing.
Yep.
Jerry Nadler, who is sort of an afterthought these days. Kind of political clubs, which have basically lost their stature and power. So I just don't know what the mechanism is.
I was at a dinner party last week with 8 of those people, and I said, who would you vote for if the election were today? And by the way, I asked some of the same group a month ago, and a month ago, 3 of them said Brad Lander, and then 2 of them said they watched one of his videos in front of the subway, and they were like, I'm not voting for that guy. So now they split 4-4 between Cuomo and Stringer.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I don't know, but I saw he was in favor, a couple more thousand cops. Cuomo, the people that like him, obvious. The people that don't like him, he's the best of the bunch. I mean, I think if Cuomo splits Brownstone, Brooklyn, he'll be the mayor.
So Cuomo has obviously, will run I would imagine, very quality of life, public safety oriented campaign, and from subways to homeless to weed shops to scaffolding to all shoplifting, all this stuff. There's a lot to talk about. At the same time, he did sign the bail reform laws. He did sign the cannabis. So I guess the question is, if you're him, what's the best answer to those questions?
Legislature was crazy, and I was doing the best I can in a time of progressive nonsense. And the point is, now I'm also the guy that did X, Y, and Z. I'm the guy that added more cops. I'm the guy that added more state troopers. I'm the guy that the PBA endorsed. I'm the guy that.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so then let's switch to the state. Siena poll also came out today. So the thing I loved in it was, did you see? You guys might not have looked at this level of detail, but do you know what the most popular budget proposal was by far?
I don't.
School meals.
Oh, wow. There's no surprise there.
I was
She's
very
signing it
excited
today. Congratulations. Yeah.
No, she's not signing school meals today. That's in the budget. You're thinking of our abortion bill.
Yes.
So our abortion bill is, and this is relevant because Maggie Carpenter is a New York OBGYN, and she has been very, very active in the movement to help women in red states get access to abortion medications via telemedicine. We passed a law in New York a couple of years ago that we funded and helped run out of Tusk Philanthropies that provides strict legal protections for people like Maggie Carpenter. So even if Governor Hochul had wanted to, extradite her to Louisiana where she's indicted or Texas where she's indicted, she couldn't. But what we did realize a little too late was, every medication you get, the prescribing doctor's info is on that pill bottle. And that's how both in Louisiana and Texas they found her. So we passed legislation the other week that now no longer requires that to be on the pill bottle. Governor Hochul is signing it as we speak. So that's what's
great.
happening. And then as of this morning, we're trying to figure out how to not pass the same bill in California. But yeah, in terms of the budget proposal, school meals was number one. And again, thank you to Governor Hochul for putting it in there. That's a huge deal. And I will say, I don't know what the kind of collateral impact was, but I will say Oregon, Delaware, Washington State, Arkansas, there's something in Kansas, maybe Ohio. I don't know if it's a Tim Walz halo effect because he did school meals or if Hochul came out a little early and that was helpful. But for whatever reason, last year we had a terrible year in terms of getting school meals bills passed, and this year looks great.
Yeah, that's great.
So with that said, the number that struck me the most in the Siena poll was that Governor Hochul's reelect was 31%, with 57% saying they prefer someone else. So those are daunting numbers for sure. But she may be down a little, but she's not out. What's the path to victory?
Well, first of all, I noticed that 31% number was everyone. So when you only look at Democrats,
Yes.
it was higher. It was like 42 or 43, which is a meaningful number in a time where it's possible that your biggest threat is from your own party, right?
Okay.
So I think there's two: Richie Torres, congressman from the Bronx, and her lieutenant governor Antonio Delgado are the two Democrats.
You think Delgado's really going to run?
He retweeted that story, the Time story about him running. I mean, it's weird.
He has nothing else going on.
I don't get it. I don't get it. I think to me, I don't understand it because I think like she made him lieutenant governor. It's going to look terrible if you run against her. But I don't know. But I would think the governor, when she ran in 2022, spent a lot of time dealing with the threat of Tish James, which was the biggest threat for her, and maybe not enough time focusing on what became Lee Zeldin. She only won by 4 or 5 points. So listen, Mike Lawler is out there. He's a Republican from wherever he's from, Hudson Valley, and he's talking about challenging her. It's still so hard to win as a Republican in this state. It hasn't happened since 2006. 2002. It could obviously happen, right? That there's money and yada yada yada.
But it's especially if Harris had won.
Yep.
Then I think you would have had such an anti-democratic backlash that it really would have maybe changed the playing field. Trump, I imagine, will piss off enough New York voters by the fall of 2026 that it really should help the Democrat quite a bit.
Yeah.
So you would say, one, her strongest opponent is Richie Torres, who no one has any idea whether Richie's actually going to run or whether he's just out there kind of poking at her because that's what some politicians do to prepare for a race. Two, her numbers are better among Democratic primary voters than they are writ large, and all that really matters in phase one is winning the primary. And three, Lawler, even if he is sort of a kind of moderate, decent statewide candidate, is still a Republican in a state where Republicans haven't won statewide in over 20 years, and Trump is likely to keep pushing people more and more away.
And the money's not there for a Republican, right? You need a Ronald Lauder. So Ronald Lauder in 22 spent 15 or 16 million bucks, and that really made it. Ronald Lauder plus the New York Post made it a close race.
Well, okay, let me give the crypto PACs.
Yep.
Which we don't work with, but we work a lot in the crypto field, so we're obviously very aware of them.
Yep.
Dropped as much as $40 million in some races last year.
Yep.
The price of Bitcoin keeps going up. The price of Ethereum keeps going up. There's more and more money splashing around. And New York is considered the toughest state regulator of crypto by far, exponentially more than anyone else. So if Mike Lawler went to the crypto world and said, I will eliminate the BIT license, I will get rid of all New York regulations, it will just be whatever everyone else has with the feds, and that's it. How do you know they wouldn't put $50 million
I don't think they want that. I don't think they want that. They want the folks who have a bit license want to close the door on the way up. I think that's the problem. I think you'd have a huge problem there because I think they're super, despite the fact that they are financially more risk ready. When it comes to politics, they tend to be a little bit more risk averse. And I think they would say.
Should we explain what a bit license is actually?
A bit license is a license that allows you to trade certain crypto and sell certain crypto that the Department of Financial Services in New York provides you. It takes a long time to get one. It's arduous. This current superintendent has made it faster. The Hochul administration has made it faster, but folks in the industry,
done a great job.
The folks in the industry would say it still takes too long. Richie Torres happens to be very, very pro crypto. So I think it's a little bit unclear what the crypto world would. I think there's some folks that think Kathy Hochul has done a great job. I'm sure Mike Lawler is probably fine on crypto as well, but I just don't know.
Yeah, and for whatever it's worth, I'm keeping a close eye obviously on the New Jersey governor's race because my brother-in-law is running. He's been very, very pro crypto as well, and if there is evidence of huge crypto money coming in, I haven't seen it.
Yep.
National, Hugo, you have some questions for us?
I mean, it's hard to actually even think of a specific question about Trump because
He's just not doing anything.
Because he's just like sitting back and playing golf. Like the tariffs supposedly go into effect.
They're in effect.
Well, it's Tuesday,
Saturday.
right? Canada and Mexico?
I thought it was
That was
Saturday.
today.
Oh.
We don't
In
know.
any case,
it's all
they're
over.
here, right?
They're here.
And he said his tweet was, will there be some, it wasn't a tweet, I think, because it was on Truth Social.
Yes.
I don't know what they call those.
A truth.
Will there be some pain? Yes, maybe, and maybe not. But we will make America great again, and it will be worth the price that must be paid.
So what I don't get is this. So I would say that Kamala Harris / Joe Biden lost for a couple of very clear reasons, right? So number one would be that Biden stayed in way too long and basically blew it. Number two would be that, generally speaking, people are just unhappy, and I think we're going to see saw back and forth between administrations for a while, one-term presidents and executives. But then there were two big policy issues, immigration and inflation, right? And inflation was sort of in many ways the biggest policy issue. The one that much more tangibly, immigration sort of has a conceptual thing, and if you live here in New York, you might see migrants on the subway selling candy, but I don't think most Americans actually saw the impact of the migrant crisis up close.
I guess, but it definitely
everyone saw inflation, every single person, right? And so I don't really do you think voters are so nuanced that they're going to be like, well, this kind of inflation is okay because Canada's policies on fentanyl are sort of too permissive?
Well, no one believes the fentanyl thing. I think the question is so the price for what, right? So if this means that there are factories in Ohio and Michigan again where where they disappeared, and it takes like a couple of years to get. I mean, that's supposed to be what happens, right?
Well, but you're paying more for avocado in the short term.
Okay, but even then. And you really can't create avocado factories in Michigan, but even if you could somehow, you're still looking at
a good idea, though.
A couple of years. So, given how short everyone's attention span is right now, if inflation goes up as a result of tariffs, let's say Trump's right on the policy, right? By the way, I'm not sure that everything he's saying about Mexico, Canada, and China is wrong, right?
On the fentanyl issue, you think?
Just generally speaking, I don't think that they spend a lot of resources trying to stop the flow of illegal immigrants to the U.S. I don't think they spend a lot of resources trying to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. There are a lot of discriminatory trade policies between those countries and ours. So, it's not that he's even necessarily wrong. The question is, in order to inflict this kind of pain on them, you also have to inflict it on American consumers. And I just have a hard time understanding why American consumers who voted Biden out of office because of inflation are now going to turn around and accept
I agree completely with what you're saying. So the question is, what the hell is he talking about? So
I think he deeply believes in tariffs.
So he just thinks tariffs are just an inherently good thing that creates economic
I think he
gain.
thinks that. Well, look, if you are a true nationalist and you believe that the only reason the U.S. would not be the best in anything is simply because of unfair policies, then you would believe that by fixing those policies, you will ultimately land in the right place. And keep in mind, look, obviously he cares a lot about his popularity, but he knows this is his last time in office, and so he's also playing for history, probably. And if he truly believes that tariffs will lead to what you said, then he thinks that ultimately
It's just
it will
so
be to his
hard to
benefit.
imagine Trump truly believing anything.
I think,
right?
I think there's a lot of people on the Trump side that think this is a negotiation and that
Right.
they're going to throw this
But
out
that's-
there and we got to punish these guys. They've gotten away with murder, and now I'm going to do my 25%, and it's going to be a better deal for us. It's the same thing.
But
with
what do we want from Canada?
It's the same thing with you. You want them to enforce. I mean, I'm not going to argue the Donald Trump position. You want them to enforce the border. You want them to cut the fentanyl costs. You want them to make prices lower. Period. That's what he wants.
Right.
I have a question for you, Bradley. I was
Yes.
thinking about this. So I, on Friday night, heard from Nydia Velasquez. We were at an event together where Cristobal Alex, who's a partner at South Strategies, was made chair of the Latino Victory Fund, and Nydia spoke. She's a congresswoman from Brooklyn, and she said, "We're going to fight Donald Trump with everything we got. We're going to fight. We need fight. The next day, I talked to a very, very prominent sort of Democrat lawyer, establishment lawyer, who I'm not going to mention, but very close with a lot of senior party executives and officials, who said, I think we have to work with Donald Trump. The people do not want us to be fighting Donald Trump. That is not what the election was about. We have to, all these people, they're asking these crazy questions to the nominees. They're going to see that's the wrong way to do it. We're going to have to meet them in the middle. Which one is it?
I think it's unfortunately neither one, right? In the sense of, I don't think look, there are hardcore partisan ideologues on both sides, right? And they want either full support or full fighting all the time. If you put them aside, because you can't win a national election with just those voters, that most people have nuanced views. So if you take that Siena poll today, when asked about deporting people here illegally who commit crimes, it was like 80-10 in favor of doing it. But when it was deporting people who were just here illegally who didn't do anything wrong, more people were against it, right? Now, same question about deportation, just different categories of people within it. And so it's two things. One is you have to have some common sense, right? So like when the Democrats and AOC fought hard against the Laken Riley Act, which is to allow the deportation of legal immigrants who commit crimes, that was fucking crazy. And I get that there was some nuance around due process and whatever else, fine. But at the end of the day, you're just taking a position that almost nobody, Democrat or Republican, thinks makes any sense and insisting on it. And it makes you look even more out of touch than ever. So there are times like that where you can't fight. But then there are going to be other times, like with the tariffs, right, that I would be doing an event at the grocery store every single day saying eggs were $4.29 last week. Now they're $4.79. Here's why, and blame Trump. So, if there are things that Americans agree with and care about, then you should be all over him. But if there are things that are really at the fringes that just your extremists care about, you should not listen.
Well, let's talk about the nominees, right? So my wife Sarah was watching some of the questioning, and she's like, "Oh my God, Klobuchar was so annoying and embarrassing. It was made you almost want to root for the, I can't remember if it was Kennedy or Gabbard or which one it was, but." What do you do there, right? Does most Americans would say we don't want these crazy people running major agencies, and yet
I think the guy. He won, so I don't.
So you get to put in.
I'd be inclined to let him put his crazy people in. That's me. I don't.
Tulsi Gabbard, head of the CIA. You're fine with that.
No, but I'm not the president. I'm a senator, and so yes, I have to advise, and you have to bring up her record, and yada. I'm not sure I'd vote for them, but.
But keep in mind, so when I worked for Chuck, and it was his comps director, his Senate committee hearings, anyone that would get any media attention, he didn't usually show up for the ones that didn't. My whole job was to figure out what's the question we can ask, the thing we can say that will get us on TV. And it had nothing to do with the substance of the hearing, the witness we were talking to, if it was a nomination, nothing. The only goal, and this was totally, I'm sure, true with Amy Klobuchar the other day as well, was she might have been wrong, but she believed.
Oh, I don't know if she was wrong. I think she was just.
Saw her on TV.
She was annoyingly right. I think.
But she believed, and her staff believed, that if she's asked this question in this way, it will get her on CNN and MSNBC, whatever it is, and they were right. So, they're not. I mean, this is always a kind of a collective action problem, which is Democrats as a whole absolutely do a lot of things differently because they have alienated broad swaths of voters. Individual Democratic lawmakers are only thinking about two things: their next election, which is in 90% of the case a primary. So the Times had an article of the week that had a really interesting stat in it, which was in 2024. Of congressional races decided by 5 points or less, just 8% of them, so 92 were not competitive, and 93% of state legislative races were not competitive. Right. So
Crazy.
basically, only the primary matters. So if you're a senator or even more a state, a Congress member, a House member who has a narrower district, you were thinking A, about the primary, and then B, the reason why you run for office in the first place, which for most of them is I want attention, I want validation, I want affirmation, which means I want my quote on TV. So they're just solving for a totally different problem.
I would also, so I think there's something here, I'm not totally sure what it is, but there's a tip of the spear thing. And I think you could go back to New York City here with Eric Adams. Eric Adams in his first year did all sorts of things that I think were a little bit crazy. And it took a while, but they have come back to bite him, right? Some of the private dealings that the staff was doing and the real estate and going out to parties every night. And he was out there doing things because he felt like he was untouchable. Right. And so the Southern District and the Justice Department jumped on him.
Right.
And right now you see this administration, there's nothing to stop them. They're doing whatever they want to do. I tend to think that like pendulums swing and pendulums
I mean, I agree, but Adams,
so therefore do what?
Well,
Fight, agree, do
pendulums
nothing?
come back. And if you look at the Iraq War as a good example of this, right? The people that were out there saying, no, of course we shouldn't go to the Iraq War. Are you out of your mind? Like, they didn't do anything. They had nothing to do with 9/11. Those people were ostracized like they were fucking crazy people. And then the course of history and the course of justice, folks were with them, right?
Yeah,
they
I mean,
were
look,
right.
Hillary Clinton
Look at
suffered
Hillary
for it,
Clinton
and
suffered
Obama.
for it.
Yeah.
So I think you have to pick your battles, but I think you can't.
But that's an argument, right?
Yeah.
For not,
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
fighting, for just being like, hey, you know what? This is going
But
the
I
other
think
way.
Bradley's right. You can't. But by the way, I watched some of the DNC coverage. No offense to the DNC coverage. Like, do we think that Democrats, the party, and I'm not talking about average Democrats, do we think that like the Democratic Party has taken in what happened and says, you know what? Like, let me think about this. Like, are we talking about the issues that folks care about, or are they still talking about things like defending the act that you just talked about? Like the
But
Riley
who
Act?
doesn't care about like a health secretary who doesn't believe in vaccines? I mean, that is something that people that affects people's actual lives, right? It's not just like let the guy in, who cares? It's the president's pick, right? It's like, hey, maybe we should see if we could save some lives here. Maybe that would be a cool idea.
How do you do
like,
that? 50% of people elected Donald Trump, and he said he.
Well, I mean, they might be able to do it. I mean, it might happen, right? He's not in yet.
But by the way, when he was running, he was like, I'm going to put this guy in front of the health department. He wasn't a secret. He was like,
right,
I'm
but people
picking
vote.
that
They
guy.
didn't vote for him for that reason, right?
I don't know what they voted for him
I
for.
think a handful of people might have, but yeah. Look, I mean,
I'm not saying he should be health secretary. I'm saying like,
Right. I understand,
And by
I
the way,
understand.
I also think by the way, it's not a two-way street. Republicans vote against every Democratic nominee every single time. So I'm certainly not saying you should just vote willy-nilly, but
and ultimately, I think, Chris, tell me if this is part of your view, is for the pendulum to swing, the best thing you can do is give Trump the rope to hang himself.
and get out of the way.
The other thing that Trump's going to do for the Democrats that is going to be incredibly helpful for them is he's going to take DEI off the table. He's going to take illegal immigration off the table. He's going to go so far in banning all of the stuff, probably effectively, that as long as you just sort of don't make too much of a fuss, these two hugely problematic issues for centrist Democrats
are gone.
gone, right? That's
Yeah.
the best thing he can do for you is to just let him do it.
Well, we're going to keep talking about Trump, but we need to do our recommendations and finish up here. So what do you got, Bradley?
I got three things. I have a book, I have an art museum show, and I have a TV show.
Let's hear 'em.
So on the museum, Laurel and I went to see a show at the Brooklyn Museum on Saturday called Solid Gold. And
Oh,
it
I heard this was
it's
good.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so
it was
funny.
What was cool about it was
It's big news. You went to Brooklyn. I'm surprised.
Hello.
had lunch at Laser Wolf. It was quite good. And then
That's not close to the Brooklyn
Not at
Museum,
all.
though.
We took an Uber from the restaurant to the museum. I just wanted to eat there. It was gold in so many different ways, from like ancient Mesopotamia to like outfit Beyonce wore at the Grammys that was gold. That like it was just really well done in that it was relevant. It was exciting. It had energy. It
Sounds
was
like something Trump would
interesting.
enjoy. Big gold
He
thing.
might,
Yeah.
yeah.
Everyone
When
likes that.
he wasn't in it, though, I don't think he would look at anything that's not about him. But
Right.
it was great.
Gold
So,
toilets? Any gold toilets?
no, that's the Mauricio Catalan, which I think the Guggenheim might own. And then, so that's that. TV show, only the first 3 episodes have dropped. It's called Paradise on Hulu. It sort of starts off as like a Secret Service
yeah.
kind of thing, but then quickly turns to sort of sci-fi. But very gripping TV.
Digging it,
I mean,
all right.
very stupid, but very gripping.
Okay.
And then on the flip side of it would be a book that I think you'd both like, but especially maybe Chris, and it's nonfiction. It's called The Pursuit of Happiness, How Classical Writers on Virtue Inspired the Lives of the Founders and Defined America by Jeffrey Rosen. And what's really interesting about it is it takes the thinking that Franklin and Washington and Jefferson and both Adams and Madison and a few others did, and kind of how not just they saw government and society, but how they saw their personal lives and responsibilities as well. How almost all of them were readers of the Stoics, right? Of Cicero, of Seneca, of Aurelius, and how they tried to incorporate those different things, and how all of those things impacted then, the way they wrote the Constitution, the way they wrote the Declaration of Independence, the way that they governed, the choices that they made. What I also liked about it was, it wasn't all a hagiography either, right? Some of it was it was in the way that most things these days are either all good or all bad. It was Jefferson was this brilliant guy who had all these interesting views and was insanely greedy and refused to let his slaves go, even though he was publicly against slavery because he spent money like water and died in debt, right? Or Hamilton, like the show showed, had all kinds of great qualities and production and inspiration. He also supported there being a lifetime monarch in the U.S. At the time of his death, right? And so on. Adams was this incredible, kind of everyone, I think, senses of Adams, very thin-skinned, annoying, difficult man, and so on. So what I liked about it was it showed how they would try to incorporate these things. I would say, to their credit, they at least seem to have some belief that a leader of a country and of a society should try to improve themselves as human beings, whereas now it's literally the opposite. And they believe that happiness comes from doing good, which now comes from feeling good, which comes from Instagram or whatever else.
Love Instagram.
But I haven't really read the Stoics. I'd always avoided them because I thought they were just too bro-y. Like, you see all those kind of like the podcasters and all like love it. And I was like, I'm not a crypto bro. I'm not a finance bro. I'm not a tech bro. I kind of don't want to. But I will say, when I think about a lot of the thinking and writing and podcasting I've done lately around how my view of happiness and life has evolved, it does seem to fit fairly closely with a lot of the Stoic views. So those are my recommendations. Chris, you got a book?
Yeah, you got a book?
That was very, very thoughtful.
Yeah, my God, that was
thoughtful.
That was one of your best recommendations ever.
Very thoughtful.
Thank you.
Have you guys talked about Playworld by Adam Ross?
We did.
Talk about that.
No, we talked about it. Hugo went to high school with it.
No, I love that book.
I liked it too. Hugo will not read it.
It's about Trinity.
Hugo
I
went to
don't know.
Trinity.
You went to Trinity.
He went to Trinity, as I went to Trinity.
Yeah, it's about.
Yes.
I mean, my brother went to Trinity. How
yeah?
old are you?
I'm not saying on the podcast.
Oh shit! Really?
Older than
Connor,
years.
how old is
I'm
Connor?
the youngest one here.
How old is your brother?
My brother is 50,
Okay, so he's younger than Hugo.
Yeah,
So
he's a
you
little
guys
younger
didn't
than me.
overlap.
maybe 51. No, he's 50. He's 50. I also.
Well, Adam was a year older than me, and as I like to say, Colson Whitehead was a year younger, so that's pretty good for
Yeah, it's
3
not
years
bad.
of.
By the way,
I should write my
if-
book,
and I
then
don't know
be-
if it will, but if Playworld, which will be eligible for the 2025 Gotham Book Prize, were to win, you would have 2 of your high school
Wow.
classmates.
Wow, God, I'll swell with pride.
Yeah.
Also, Something Rotten by Andrew. Have you guys read Something Rotten? Andrew Lipstein. He read The Vegan. He wrote The Vegan. I only
I
just
didn't,
started,
but
so I don't want to recommend
read
it hardcore.
The Vegan,
I know
and
I didn't love
like
The Vegan,
it.
but I think this
Yeah.
is better.
All right.
At least the beginning is better.
I didn't like. But Vegan was one of those weird books
I
where I
know.
didn't stop after 50 pages, and yet
And
when
you
it was over,
disliked
I
it.
was like, I disliked that book.
Yeah, I think this is better, but I've only read 25 pages.
Okay, so
I
we'll
love
come
that you
back
guys
to
are
me.
such like politics nerds and book nerds. It's an interesting Venn
You got to
diagram.
read, man. What are you going to do at night?
Yeah, I know. I
need
know
something
you
to-
guys
Especially
watch
when
a
the
lot of
Mets
TV
aren't
too.
playing. The Mets aren't
Every
playing.
time Bradley mentions a TV show, I'm like, I don't watch any TV.
I don't know what does everyone do with their time?
What do you do at night?
I feel like
I read, but I only read weird punk rock memoirs.
Right. But I mean, just generally speaking, I don't know about you guys. And look, I don't have little kids anymore, so that changes it. But like, I always feel like there's enough time for everything.
I know,
Right?
But you're weird that way.
I kind of agree with that. I don't write. I mean, Bradley, you write a lot. I would get bogged down in writing copious amounts of writing, but I definitely have time to watch television and sports and read books.
Yeah.
My kids are in bed by 9. They're asleep by 9. So what are you going to do from 9 to 11?
Right. Yeah.
Let's talk about it later. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
You had a recommendation.
No, you know what? I'm going to
Come
save
on.
my recommendation.
You got to say the whole world with bated breath.
Jesus Christ.
You
No,
can't,
I mean,
you
I
can't
just
do
I
this.
just read a Mary Gateskill novel called Veronica that I've been meaning to
Oh,
read for
yeah,
a really
that's
long
very
time.
famous.
And I thought it was fucking awesome.
Okay,
Like,
so I've
No
tried
swears.
twice to read it because it's
really?
considered one of the great New York novels, right?
I mean, it's only partially about New York, but
It's on all those lists, I'm telling you.
really, I mean, it some of it takes place in New York, but a lot of it takes place in Paris. The present tense is in
But
California.
I have had a trouble getting into it twice. Would you recommend trying one more time?
You know, it's funny. I can see why. Like, it's not a very plot driven book.
Yeah.
And it has a very it has a lot of edge, and it's distressing in ways. But I just found it I just thought the sentences and the quality of the prose generally were just it just kind of I would just have to stop reading and think about it for a little while.
Well, all right. That's
Wow.
impressive.
Very
all right,
impressive.
guys, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Firewall is recorded at my bookstore, P&T Knitwear, located at 180 Orchard Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We'd love to hear from you with questions, feedbacks, or idea for a guest. Just email me at bradley@firewall.media or find me on LinkedIn. And to keep up with what's on my mind and my latest writing, please follow my new Substack at bradleytusk.substack.com. Thanks again for listening.